got a lot of self-confidence. I have always been physically and mentally and emotionally strong. And when I became vegan, I felt like the strength inside of me was there to such a degree that I could give back. And I wanted to give something back. And so I knew that I could be an undercover investigator. And so that's what I chose to do. The pain and suffering that I experienced, that I went through as an undercover investigator, was tremendous. The things that we put ourselves through are horrible for our experiences psychologically and emotionally and physically. I've been cut open more times than I can remember. I've been burnt by fire, hot water, I've had chemical burns, I've had sunburns, I've had heat exhaustion to the point of vomiting more than once. I've been kicked by hooves, stabbed by all kinds of objects, smacked by wings, clawed, rammed, knocked down. I've been bitten by several different types of animals. I've had dislocations and broken bones. I've even had to work through the pain of having broken ribs while trying to work on a factory farm. It's horrible. To be an undercover investigator is horrible. But it's nothing, nothing compared to the suffering of these animals every day. So I want to tell you about a few of the animals that I know, a few of the animals that I saw suffer. I worked at a no-kill shelter in North Carolina with a woman who was hoarding dogs, who had a couple of dogs that really made an impact on me. Hammer and Atlas were their names. Hammer was a pit bull, and he was really friendly and loved to meet new people, and he loved to play, but anytime he got out of his cage, he would try to attack and kill other dogs. Now, this wasn't his problem. It was because some person had taught him that that's the behavior he should be doing. Atlas was a Shepherd Mastiff Rottweiler mix, and a big dog fight broke out in the pen that he was in one day. I had separated a dog out of the fight and was holding her in my arms. Atlas got away from the person who was holding him, ran across the pen and jumped up and tried to bite the dog in my arms, and instead he bit the back of my arm and hung on and swung. He didn't mean to do that, I don't think. He was trying to, he wasn't an aggressive dog, he was just excited because he was young. Luckily, it was the winter time and I was wearing like 4 layers of clothing, so the resulting injuries weren't as bad as they could have been. Both Hammer and Atlas, at the end of that case, when the shelter was finally shut down, both Hammer and Atlas were given psychological evaluations and they were deemed unfit for rehabilitation, and both of them lost their lives because of things that people did to them. Neither one of them ever got a chance. The first factory farm I worked at was Tyson Farm. During that case, the first time I walked into the kill room and saw live hanging and experienced that for myself, it took my breath away. I'd seen video, I'd seen undercover footage, I'd seen Earthlings. I thought I knew what I was in for, and I was still unprepared. It takes your breath away, and it's unbelievable. These men were just destroying the lives of these birds who were only afraid for their own lives. They were throwing them overhand like a baseball, pitching them at the shackles. They were smacking them, punching them, kicking them. They would crush them on the belt when they struggled. It was horrendous. And these birds were simply afraid. After the birds are shackled, they go through a stun bath and a killing blade. They're supposed to be rendered unconscious by the stun bath and then have their throats cut by the killing blade. But this doesn't always happen. And there's a person standing at the back of that machine called the backup killer. He stands there with a dull knife and he cuts the throats of the birds that missed that killing blade. I spent a week doing that job. Killing the very animals that I was there to save, just so I could get footage, so that people would know the reality of what happens in factory farms. Those birds, when they come through there, they are fully aware of what's happening. They look up at you and they are begging to you for their lives. They want mercy from you, and they want nothing more than for you to show them compassion, and you have no choice when you're in that situation but to take the knife and cut their throat. I worked several other cases, Avian turkeys in West Virginia, and Spargo farms in Minnesota, Iowa, and Colorado, where the same things were happening there. The workers were torturing animals for fun at Avian. They simulated raping the birds. They would hold their necks up and shove feet down their throats. The guys carrying the turkeys to the trucks to load them out for slaughter or for sale they were supposed to hand the birds off to men on scaffolding so that they could put the turkeys in the cages on the trucks. And instead of doing that, these guys would just take the birds and throw them as hard as they could at the side of the truck and try to make it in the cage. And of course that never worked out very well for the turkeys, because they would hit the metal siding on the truck, bounce off, hit the ground, and then the guys would get mad at the turkeys like they'd done something wrong, and they'd be stomping on their heads, just beating them to death, basically. I don't know if you guys know much about turkeys. In the wild, they're 22 to 25 pounds. The heaviest turkey that we weighed at Avian was 113 pounds because of the hormones and the steroids and stuff that they give to those animals. They can't even hold themselves up. At Spargo, we worked 26 days in a row in the heat wave in the summer of 2011 in Colorado, working 12-hour days in barns that were over 110 degrees. These men that worked on this crew were grabbing birds by the fistful and yanking them out of cages to go into the battery cages, out of the rolling cages that came off of the trucks to go into the battery cages, and breaking their wings and their legs and slamming them as hard as they could in and out of the cages, just because the company wanted it done as quickly as possible, just to make more money, just to be time efficient. They would take catching rods that were these long metal rods with a hook at the end, and they'd snare the birds by the neck or the leg and swing them around over their heads for fun, for no other reason than they enjoyed it. And this happened day after day during depopulation and population for 26 days in a row, 15 to 20 men, in these conditions that were unbelievable. The chickens lived through unbelievable heat and in barns that were so thick with rodents and flies that it would make you sick. I mean, when you're walking through the barn, you can't pass your hand in front of your face without hitting 100 flies, it seemed like. I mean, they were everywhere. They were covering everything. At Hebrew Processors and Cargill and JBS Swift, I watched cattle being slaughtered. I worked on the line, cutting carcasses apart, and I saw what happens when these sentient beings who are gentle and peaceful realize they're about to die. They cry, literally, just like me and you. They're afraid for their lives, and they feel what's happening to them, and they know it's awful. Hebrew Processors, I'm sure you guys have probably, most of you, seen the footage of that. It's a giant metal barrel that the cows go into, and then it rotates and flips them upside down on their back, and they have their head held back by a bar where a rabbi can come cut their throats. And I assure you that there is nothing kosher, nothing gentle, and nothing spiritual about that process. It's awful. The men in the room who are watching it know it's awful, and you can see it on their faces, but the worst thing to see is these cows, because they know they're about to die. One of the most horrible things that I went through was working at Christensen Farms in Minnesota. This was a pig farm where farrowing mothers had piglets that were sent to slaughter. And I worked on a crew that took care of the newborn baby piglets. We were in charge of vaccinating and castrating these young animals. When they're born, they come into the world, even in such a horrible place. They're in a tiny crate, their mother can't move around, and they're over a metal grate with a pit full of urine and feces and water and just all kinds of disgusting chemicals. And these piglets are happy about their lives, they're happy to be alive, they're full of joy. And then you have to destroy that world for them by grabbing a pair of dull pliers, cutting them open and ripping out their insides, cutting their tails off. Many of them have their teeth cut off. And the mothers are left in gestation crates where they can't move and they can't take care of themselves, they can't turn around, they can't lay down. And what we do to them makes them insane. You can see these animals that are so intelligent going crazy right in front of your eyes. And it's awful, and it's unforgivable. The pain that these animals experience is so real for them. They are every bit as alive and caring and sentient as we are. They, well, just as everybody here has been saying this entire conference, they are persons. They are not human, but they are persons in their own right. Something that's very important to me that I want to touch on really quickly is the way that we as activists and organizations deal with the food production system. We are the leaders of this social movement, and it takes a lot of courage to stand apart from the system itself. The way that these companies try to deal with these undercover investigations is to blame a scapegoat. They point their finger at one person and say, this man was doing bad things and this is not happening anymore. We know that that's not true. We also know that the retailer can blame a particular company and try to switch from one supplier to another and say we're getting our products from someone who doesn't do these horrible abuses, and we know that's not true. It is imperative as activists, as leaders of this social movement, that we hold the system itself responsible, that we focus on supporting organizations like MFA and COK and PETA and any organization who does undercover work, so that they don't simply go after convictions of men doing these things, but that they place the responsibility on the consumer themselves and say, your dinner causes death. Yeah. This is